when you get a hair mineral test, it's a biopsy of the hair, and
Mhm.
that can give me an overall picture of what's been happening in the body for the last 3 months. And so we're looking at mineral status, we're looking at micromineral status, we're looking at heavy metal status as well. It can give us a lot of information about what's happening internally in the system, in the whole body. Tell us about quite a few minerals. So calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, iron, copper, manganese can all be measured, zinc, chromium, selenium, and phosphorus. And then it looks at all of the heavy metals that are big in our society right now, like aluminum, which is super ubiquitous, lead, mercury, which is seen in a lot of kids with developmental delays, cadmium, arsenic, nickel. You can pull up on cobalt and lithium, and it tells us a bit about molybdenum as well. And so not only does it give us the key minerals that we need to be studying, but also do we have a heavy metal toxic burden in the system?
I'm extremely happy to have Janelle with us today. Janelle is a massage therapist specializing in Swedish massage, craniosacral therapy, and hair tissue mineral analysis. Hello,
Yes.
Janelle.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, and I forgot to mention you are also Malilo certified practitioner.
That's right.
So without further ado, let's welcome Janelle and thanking her very much for taking the time and being with us. So could you tell me what brought you to the field of holistic therapy?
Well, I actually have always been interested in it. And back in 1998, all those years ago, I went to massage school and I took a program here in Canada and I became a registered massage therapist in 2000. So I've been practicing for 24 years.
Oh.
And then I got into craniosacral work and I got into myofascial work and I got into somato-emotional work. And I was just, I couldn't get enough learning and hands-on work. So I traveled and I've settled now in Edmonton for the last 14 years, which has been
Uh-huh.
great. And then I had a baby and I had a beautiful little baby girl. My pregnancy was perfect. I had a midwife. We had a beautiful water birth.
Yeah.
And then I held this little baby, 8 pounds, 2 ounces, born right on time, and I felt like something was just not right. She was very floppy right from birth.
Mm.
So I'd held quite a few babies before. My brothers both had children and they're older than I am. And I've always loved kids. And so I just thought, this is not right. Something's not right here. And so I talked to the doctor, talked to our pediatrician. He was a sort of a senior pediatrician. He was due for retirement. He'd seen a ton of babies, thousands and thousands in his practice. And then she just wasn't meeting her milestones. She wasn't rolling over, she wasn't crawling. She didn't really she wasn't interested in many things when it came to gross motor movement. And then we just kept questioning him about what was happening, and he just said, "Don't worry about it. As long as she walks by 18 months, there's no problem. I'm not gonna worry about anything." So 17 months and 6 days, my daughter got up and just started to walk.
Oh,
But
wow.
when she walked, she would fall, wham, and hit her forehead all the time.
Mhm.
And so now knowing what I know about the Melillo method and all the functional neurology piece, the postural muscles didn't really do their job. The strength in her body really wasn't there. Her cerebellum in her brain probably wasn't super developed, which was decreasing the amount of balance in her proprioceptive systems. And she just didn't have the strength she needed, but she was walking. And so the doctor thought that this was fine. At the time, she was putting 2 words together, which was great because we were noticing a gain in sort of speech and more words.
Mhm.
And then we got vaccinated, and I know this is super controversial, but as soon as we were vaccinated, my daughter stopped talking altogether.
Wow.
Speech was gone. And so then I started to look at ways to help her. We put her in a preschool that dealt with speech and language delays. She had an OT on board, a PT on board, speech therapy on board. We got everybody in that we could to try and help her. And she
Mhm.
just wasn't gaining a ton of momentum. And so I read Dr. Malillo's book years ago, and I just thought, this has got to be what's going on in her brain. We finally had an answer for what was happening. So that just has led me to all of this holistic work that I'm doing now, where I just can't get enough learning and educating on why. What is the why behind why all of this is happening? And then I got into doing some mineral testing. because she also was very low energy. I would see other kids playing and running and jumping, and they just had this boundless amount of energy. And Eliana just would lose it, and she would have to sit down, and she would need a rest, and she just didn't have energy. Why was that? Her blood work was all coming back perfect within the normal range, according to every doctor. But what was going on internally with her? And so I got into hair mineral testing, and that's why you and I are talking today.
Oh, wow. So what is exactly her mineral testing?
It's actually a tissue biopsy. So when I looked at one of the posts that I saw actually on Instagram, I asked the same thing. What could it tell me? Why would I do it? What kind of information could it give me? And so it's a tissue biopsy of the hair. Unlike
Mhm.
blood can change every 24 to 36 hours. So you could go in for blood work. I could take my daughter in for blood work, and 36 hours later, we could get a bit of a shift in what was happening in the blood. You could go eat a chocolate bar and your blood would change. You could be under a stressful situation and your blood would change. When you get a hair mineral test, it's a biopsy of the hair. Every month, your hair grows about a centimeter. So I take about 3 centimeters worth of hair, and that
Mhm.
can give me an overall picture of what's been happening in the body for the last 3 months. And so we're looking at mineral status, we're looking at micromineral status, we're looking at heavy metal status as well. It can give us a lot of information about what's happening internally in the system, in the whole body, not
Oh.
just a little sort of snippet of the blood, but in the whole body, it can let us know what's going on.
And how accurate do you think this testing is?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the 1970s, Dr. Eck started doing this work, and he started basing it on so much data that he had found on minerals. And it's extremely accurate because it's a biopsy of the body. The hair is dead, but the
Mhm.
hair can hold that little snippet of information. It locks it in inside that hair follicle. So it's extremely accurate, and it's very efficient. It's also a broader picture again of what the whole body can tell us, not just a little bit of information. So there's a ton that we can learn about what's happening inside the body too.
And what do you think are the main minerals people should pay attention to?
Well, it can tell us about quite a few minerals. So calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, iron, copper, manganese can all be measured, zinc, chromium, selenium, and phosphorus. And then it looks at all of the heavy metals that are big in our society right now, like aluminum, which is super ubiquitous, lead, mercury, which is seen in a lot of kids with developmental delays, cadmium, arsenic, nickel. You can pull up on cobalt and lithium, and it tells us a bit about molybdenum as well. And so not only does it give us the key minerals that we need to be studying, but also do we have a heavy metal toxic burden in the system? And what I'm finding with so many of these clients that I'm working with is we're littered with toxic heavy metals, which then can go into all of these lovely binding sites where minerals belong, and they just take up space, they take up rent, and they just hang out in these systems where they're not supposed to be.
Mhm. So with the results you get, what would be the first steps you'd be guiding a family?
Okay, so they would come in because they probably have some sort of symptom. So maybe they're fatigued. Maybe they've gone for blood work and they're just not feeling well. Maybe a woman comes in and says, Janelle, I've had these migraine headaches for 2 years. They keep putting me on these high dose prescription medications for these migraines. I don't understand why they're not going away. And that was a very real client that I had. And so, what I'm looking for is all of the minerals. So, it can measure the minerals on the hair test individually. And then it gives me ratios of what's happening with these minerals. So, key ratios that you can measure are metabolic rate. So, are they really slow metabolizers? Are they really fast metabolizers? It's common for kids from the age of 0 to 8 or 10 to be really fast metabolizers because they're growing so much. They're growing exponentially. But I had a little boy who should have been a fast metabolizer, and I got his hair test back, and he's what's in a four lows pattern. So all of his first four major minerals, are well below the ideal rate of what they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that there's going to be a problem because he doesn't have the energy in his systems and his cells, in his mineral status to make him healthy. Something's going to be dysfunctional in his body. It can also give us our adrenal function strength. So the sodium to magnesium ratio tells us what our adrenals are doing. Then you've got the calcium to potassium ratio, which is our thyroid ratio. How
Yeah.
healthy is our thyroid? Most people go in and they get blood work, and the thyroid comes back normal. It's within a normal range.
Yeah.
But their hair is starting to get brittle. They've lost or put on weight. Their skin is drying out. Something is happening with that thyroid in their symptomatology, showing us that there's something dysfunctional. The difference too with blood is that it will not show you a deficit until it's really bad. So by the time it shows up in the blood, you've probably had it a decade, but the blood will remain homeostatic. It will pull from bones, it will pull from soft tissue, it'll pull from everywhere so that blood remains totally balanced.
Yes.
As soon as that ratio in the blood is off, it's been off for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
We can also look at your stress ratio on there. So that's the sodium to potassium ratio. That is a big key in our nervous system dysfunction. So when you and I talk about Dr. Melillo's work in functional neurology, we look at the sympathetic system. Are these kids in fight or flight? What is happening with their vagal nerve? What is happening with that system? And the sodium to potassium ratio can actually pick up on where they're sitting in that system. Are they in a stress state? Are they in sympathetic dominance? What is happening with them? Male, female, adult, mom, dad, kids. So it's a really good ratio to let me know what's happening internally in their system with that whole sympathetic and parasympathetic system as well. And I can also look at the hormone ratio. So I have lots of women because I've done massage for so many years. And I have lots of women in my practice. They're kind of getting into this perimenopausal state, menopausal state. Hormones are shifting. Maybe people's periods have been all over the map. They don't have an answer from their doctor. The
Yeah.
only answer they get is go on a blood birth control pill and see if it regulates your system. The zinc to copper ratio becomes our hormone ratio, progesterone to estrogen ratio. And I can tell if something is really out of whack in a woman's cycle. I can also figure out if men are tanking with their testosterone. So as men get older, they get tired, they maybe lose a little bit of their libido, they don't have as much energy, maybe they're gaining some more weight. Something is happening with their system that's out
Yeah.
of balance. And I can pick up on that as well in the hair mineral test.
Ah. And let's take a case of a child on the autistic spectrum who comes to you and does the test.
Yes.
What would be the steps after you get the results?
So what happens, the hair will be sent away to a lab in Arizona. Within 2 weeks, I then get the results back. I then go through it for about 2 hours and I comb through every individual mineral, every individual ratio, and then I can put a program together for a parent with a child on the spectrum or a child with ADHD. I have a ton of kids that are coming in with ADHD. Typically, they're very magnesium deficient. Those kids, magnesium is known as a softening mineral. It softens the whole system. You know, in this world that we live in with these kids, typically they're constipated as well. Every doctor will put you on magnesium, but there's also antagonists and synergists to magnesium. Minerals don't work by themselves, they work together with other minerals. So, magnesium, if you just give it on its own for these kids that you think are constipated, can tank sodium in the body. And that was the case with us. My daughter started taking magnesium because she was getting a little bit ADHD type symptoms. Everybody told us that would be a good idea. And then she started to look like either her blood pressure was dropping or her blood sugar was dropping. So
Mm.
that's what was happening. Her sodium on her hair test already had come back very low. And so when I started just giving her magnesium, it was dropping that sodium even more, which was creating more of an issue and an imbalance in her system. So it wasn't until I tested her hair to find out what she was deficit in, and then I could give her all the minerals to work together in her system because they all work together.
Uh-huh. And I know you wanted to share a story about a little boy, a 4-year-old.
Yes, so I have a 4-year-old boy. And his mom came in. We actually worked on his primitive reflexes, got those integrated as much as we could. He was making very good gains. And then she just said something was happening with his overall mood. He was a bit more dysregulated. Something was happening. Between January and March of this year, he ended up in the children's hospital because he had 3 asthmatic attacks that just about took his life. So they used high dose steroids in a case like that to help get more blood and oxygen to the lungs so that he could breathe.
Mhm.
He was given 2 puffers when he was done, and he was on these puffers every day.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to know the status of what was happening in with his mineral status, and his mom wanted to do a hair test. So we had a hair test done. His hair test came back that he was what was in a 4 lows pattern. So when you look on a hair test, you can look to see that sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium were all below the ideal range. He
Mhm.
was what was in a very big burnout pattern. I'll see this more in adults as they get older because the stress of life takes over and we become very, very deficient. Stress can kill the mineral status. I also looked to find out what the name of the puffers were that he took, and they were all steroids. Steroids can deplete the body of calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin C, B vitamins. So I knew that him taking that puffer day after day after day was going to deplete the mineral status. So I put him on some minerals, and within 6 weeks, that boy never used his puffer. And even the
Wow.
forest fires, I know in Canada that were pretty bad this summer, his mom said he didn't need his puffer. So it was incredible. He was also very aluminum toxic. So when his test came back, it showed me he had 4,000 times the amount of aluminum that anybody in their system should have. So
Yes.
then we started to look at where that was coming from. So we talked to the mom, they live on a farm. Aluminum can be found everywhere, it can be found in our water supply. It's the most ubiquitous heavy metal out there. And he would drink a can of buble every day. He would drink out of an aluminum can,
Yeah.
and there's a source of aluminum right there.
Oh,
So it's not definitive on where that aluminum was coming from,
yeah.
but aluminum, through something called ionic mimicry, can go into the tissues to take up these sites where maybe calcium belongs, magnesium belongs, and it
Mhm.
just takes over. It looks very similar to calcium,
Yeah.
and aluminum just sort of goes in there and it becomes a heavy metal and it becomes a very toxic burden on the body. So it was a big problem for this little system. But had that little boy not got checked, who knows what would happen with him at 6, 7, 8, 10 years old.
No.
Most doctors can say that you outgrow asthma. I'm not sure that would have been the
Yes.
case with this little boy.
Oh, and for children on the autistic spectrum, would you say, how would you compare the different testing? Like, would you say hair testing is your priority in comparison to other testing?
I now, with an autistic daughter, would only do hair testing, and I've taken courses with different guys. There's a doctor actually in Florida. He basically no longer does blood testing anymore. He's just using hair mineral testing
Wow.
because he's finding it so beneficial for the body and can pick up on things years before the blood will pick up on it. So for autistic children, again, their blood tests may show that everything is fine, but
Yes.
there's something very deficient happening in them. Most of them are in a burnout pattern. Most of them are in sympathetic dominance where they are running, they're in this fight or flight mode in
Mhm.
this part of their brain all of the time. And so it can pick up on that very quickly. And then we just use minerals to balance it out for them. It's just minerals. It's been incredible.
Oh, wow. And Janelle, how can people contact you?
My Instagram page is Holistic Integrative Therapy on Instagram. They can email me directly at Janelle Boychuk, JANELLEBOYCHUK at shaw.ca. And I'm up in Canada, but I can perform the test on anyone anywhere in the world. It's an email that's sent with all the directions on how to take the hair sample, where to send it, and then once
Mm-hmm.
it's sent into the lab, then I get the results and I can do up the comprehensive report for clients and
Okay,
patients.
so internationally, people can do it as well, right?
You bet they can. Yeah, you bet. It's all sent via email through my business, Holistic Integrative Therapy. And then, yeah, I will look at the report, look at the graph, and spend some time going over everything for them.
Wow. This has been such a wonderful talk, learning a lot about this testing. And I know many of our followers, many of our families could really take advantage of this testing. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.